images. So it's not going to open it up in Elements Editor. It's going to open it up in what's called a RAW plugin. This is where we get a chance to manipulate a pristine image, and we make the decisions on how it works. So let's do a little bit of a run through of what we got up here. Number one, you got a zoom tool. I think we all know what a zoom tool does. We can come over here, we can zoom. If you double click the zoom tool, it takes you to 100%. The hand tool, of course, allows us to move around. And don't forget the shortcut. If you are working with zoom and you want to move around someplace else, hold the space bar down. The hand tool, if we double click it, will take us back down to a position where it shows it to us in the screen. The eyedropper tool allows us to select areas of the image for things such as white balance, and we'll talk about that later, but that's a nice tool to have. You have a cropping tool, of course, and the cropping tool, if you click and hold, gives you ratios if you want to use them. Notice it says constrain to image as a default, and what that does basically is if I try to crop it, it will crop it in the same ratio as the image that's up. We have a straightening tool, very similar to the one that we used in Photoshop Elements. In fact, it's the same thing. We have the ubiquitous red eye removal tool, and it works just as good as the one in Elements. We have a button here for preferences, so let's stop and look at those. If you click it, number one, you have Save Image Settings In, and you have a choice of a sidecar or a raw database. I would choose, in most cases, the XMP file, and let me explain that. When we work in RAW on the image, we're working on a negative, and we never ever damage the negative. All the changes we made are put into a file, so when the image is opened in Elements, it knows what to do based on what we did here. That's the sidecar file. So if you have a file called 123.raw, and you make changes to it, when you open up the folder that image is in, it's going to have 123.raw and 123.xmp. If you throw the XMP file away, the image reverts back to what it was at the beginning. So it's non-destructive editing. I prefer the sidecar. The raw database puts them in a proprietary place. To me, it's harder to get to. So I usually prefer that one, but it's up to you, of course. I don't like sharpening all. That's the default. I like preview images only, mainly because if you've got a lot of raw, now we actually don't. We only have 5 or 6. But if we had a lot, it's kind of processor intensive, so I usually change that one to preview images only, but I'll leave it at all images because that's the default. Down here, apply auto tone. I don't like autoing anything, to be honest with you, so I don't use that one. If you don't like it, you can readjust it later, but I'll make those decisions. Make default specific to the serial number of the camera or the ISO. I do like that. If you've got more than one digital camera, you can have default settings based on the camera or the speed of the film that you're using. Now, DNG we'll talk about later. That's converting raw images into DNGs and why you might want to do that. So let's go ahead and click OK. Over here, you have a preview button. This button will expand to fill the screen. You know what? That's not too bad. We'll leave it there. Over here, we have the histogram. Now, remember, we worked in the histogram in this lesson series, and it works and functions the same way. Down here, you have 3 buttons. One for basics. Now, we'll get into basics on an image in the next lesson. These are all your basic adjustments that you can do. You have a button here for sharpening and noise reduction. And finally, one over here for camera calibration. Now, over here, well, you got a button if you want to make it bigger or smaller. You can click here and basically change it here. You can save the image. Again, we'll talk about that later. That's saving to DNG, for example. The bit depth right here. Now, if it is at 16 bits, I see very few reasons why you would probably want to change that while you're working, because 16-bit images have more stuff in them. Over here, done means I've made changes, but I don't want to open the image in Elements. Go ahead and take me back to the organizer, but save what I did. Cancel means I don't like what I did. I don't even want to save it. Open means open in Elements Editor. Now, when you open it in Elements Editor, you actually do get another image to work on. In the negative, the raw image is saved. Let's go ahead and cancel out of here. Get back, see, right into the organizer. And let's move into the next lesson.